Idea's parents, Nate and Cleo, are in this chamber tonight, along with more than 24 Americans whose lives have been torn apart by gun violence. They deserve a vote. They deserve a vote. They deserve a vote. Gabby Giffords deserves a vote. The families of Newtown deserve a vote. The families of Aurora deserve a vote. The families of Oak Creek and Tucson and Blacksburg and the countless other communities ripped open by gun violence, they deserve a simple vote.
That's right. They deserve a vote. Greetings, everybody. This is Danielle and Shano sitting in for Tom. They deserve a vote. President Obama, the 2013 State of the Union address. And John Nichols joining us now, national affairs correspondent with The Nation magazine. John, will we actually see that vote? Could it be?
We'll see some votes, remarkably enough. And I think we have to put it in perspective.
Yes.
They're small votes.
Yes.
I mean, if we're talking about genuinely addressing everything that happened in Orlando on early Sunday morning, there's so much placed on the table there.
Yes.
That what this Congress, certainly this Senate, will do will be insufficient. However, we have lived in a period of silence since 2007. That was the last time there was even meaningful discussion by most measures. And what has happened since the Orlando shootings, the Orlando massacre, has been something remarkable. Democrats in the House and Senate, who by and large, not everyone, but by and large up to this point, had been willing to go along with the charade of silence. They'd been willing to participate in a ceremony that occurred after each of these mass slayings that we've had in America, which involved a moment of silence and the suggestion that somehow you disrespected the dead by raising responsible proposals.
Yes, that somehow politicizing the tragedy was the real problem here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, what's very interesting is I think this actually began after the killings last fall in California. And you saw the New York Daily News and a few other people, including Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, say, when all the Republicans stepped up and said they sent their thoughts and prayers, say, that's not enough.
Yeah, people are sick of hearing thoughts and prayers. People are sick of sending thoughts and prayers. This feeling of inaction, both, frustration at Congress for doing nothing, frustration at the gun lobby for blocking any meaningful action.
No.
Yeah, and frustration with ourselves for only managing to have thoughts and prayers to send. I want to just quickly let everybody know, John Nichols is joining us, national affairs correspondent with The Nation magazine, also co-author of the new book, People Get Ready, The Fight Against a Jobless Economy and a Citizenless Democracy. You can find his great work at thenation.com. Sorry, John, didn't give your full introduction there. I wanted to just get right into your opinion, but please continue.
Well, that's why I like it. I like doing this with you because we do go. I think we go deep and fast.
Yes, I love it.
Places we got to get to, and the fact of the matter is that when the Orlando shooting occurred, I texted some members of Congress who I cover a lot, have known for years, and I said, what's going to happen? And one of the strongest members of the House, Mark Pocan, a Democrat from Wisconsin, said, I really fear we're going to go back to Washington, and it's just going to be business as usual. And Pocan is an openly gay member of Congress, as well as an advocate for sensible responses to gun violence and a host of other issues. And when he said that, and he said, I really am afraid maybe nothing's going to happen, you could just feel the frustration, the anger. And on Monday morning, Pocan put out a statement in which he said, we must replace moments of silence with moments of action.
Mm-hmm.
And he and others, I think, somehow this caught a lot of people the same way. And maybe it is because this is such a huge thing that happened in Orlando. As the president says, an act of terror and an act of hate.
Yes.
The worst mass shooting in modern American history. So many things, so epic, so overwhelming. And I think it just tripped the switch. And so in the House on Monday night, you had this remarkable moment where a group of members of Congress walked out rather than participate in the moment of silence. And then when Paul Ryan, having gone through this embarrassingly ritualistic moment of silence thing that they do every time, and they literally timed to 30 seconds, just an awful failure to respond in any kind of deep way. When Ryan finished, Jim Clyburn, the congressman from South Carolina, which of course experienced the horrible Charleston slayings, stepped up and began to ask a question. He said, look, when are we going to start talking about some of these gun issues? Now, Clyburn's very respected in the House by Republicans and Democrats. And as Clyburn got to a mention of, that what happened in Orlando on Sunday comes almost exactly a year after what happened in Charleston. As he was mentioning it, Ryan gavelled him out of order.
Yeah.
Shut him down. And members of the House, Democratic members of the House, started yelling from the floor, where are the bills, and no leadership. And in the House, that's all they could do. They could only yell from the floor or walk out. But the Senate has a different set of rules. And on Wednesday, midday, 11 a.m., 11:20, I think it was, Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, who's an incredible hero in all this, who's been on the floor often alone for the last 4 years talking about Newtown, Sandy Hook, and each of these, reading the names of the dead into the Senate record. Again, not just silenced or paid little attention by Republicans, but frankly, left alone on that floor often by many Democrats. Chris Murphy tweeted around 11:20 yesterday that he just had enough.
Yep.
He went to the floor, he got the microphone, or got to the place where he could speak from the floor, and he announced he wasn't giving it up. He was going to hold the floor for as long as he could in order to force action.
Yep.
Initially, only a handful of senators went with him. Cory Booker was very good, Richard Blumenthal as well. Booker said, I'm clearing my schedule. I'm going to stand with Chris Murphy today. And as the day went on, more and more senators came to the floor. This was not some massively coordinated months in the planning thing. This is the immediate impassioned reaction that we should have to a mass slaying.
And it was impassioned. It was such a strong reaction. We were watching late into the evening last night, had C-SPAN 2 on at home, watching these senators, take a stand. And yeah, I know that there are people saying, well, we should have fought for an assault weapons ban or this or that. But I am just so proud of them for taking a stand for something at this point. John, you're going to stick around with us and we'll get into more about this amazing 15-hour filibuster?
Yeah.
All right, great. John Nichols of The Nation, more with both of us when we come back. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
What did you think about Chris Murphy's amazing 15-hour filibuster? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV. John, are you still with us?
I sure am.
I don't know about you, but I flipped through a lot of the main network channels last night, and I was appalled that as these gentlemen were on the floor, ladies and gentlemen, were on the floor speaking and standing up for what they believe in and fighting for what all of us are calling for, the networks were talking about Trump. And I was appalled. I'm thrilled to know that here on Free Speech TV, we were talking about it, and lots of other people were talking about it. What are your thoughts on that? You're writing about it. You obviously see that this is important.
I think it's historic.
Yes.
I think it's a historic pivot. I think what we're seeing is Democrats in the Senate and the House, maybe some Republicans too, making just stepping beyond the charade of silence, cracking the NRA's wall of silence. This is a big deal. It's an epic thing. And I'm furious, frankly, as I often am at our media. But I'm particularly upset with what happened last night. Because understand this. When the killings occurred, and in this immediate aftermath, not just cable but broadcast media went wall to wall with coverage. Mm-hmm. That was entirely appropriate. We show the horror. We show
absolutely
trauma. We must, and more power to them. They sent their anchors down. They did the job. Now, though, when we see a response, when we see the potential that we, the people, might do something, it's not news.
No.
It's an incredible. It breaks the chain that makes democracy function.
Yes.
Democracy only functions if we see trauma, we see tragedy, we see horror, and then we come to conclusions about what should be done, and we see action on that. Well, what was happening in the Senate shouldn't be delinked from or seen as some sort of bureaucratic response to what happened in Orlando. It is part and parcel of it. It is the extension of it. It's what makes it possible for us to believe, as hard as it's going to be on all these issues,
right?
Believe that something might be done.
Yeah, and
I'm really upset with how the media.
As a media person, this would have also been a great time for the networks to take a victory lap and say, see, our coverage here and our, empowering the community and the shared outrage over this tragic event is what inspired, this amazing action in the Senate. They could have totally, whether or not that's accurate, we can certainly discuss. But that would have been a great time to say, hey, let's pat ourselves on the back and look what we accomplished here. And it was a missed opportunity there by the networks.
I think you're right. I think also, look, I think the response is genuine and impassioned.
Yes.
And I have no doubt of that. But I also think that, there is this dynamic, there's this interplay between media and politics. Mm-hmm. And when media pays attention to things, politicians pay attention to things. And that's not to neglect that some of these politicians whom the media hasn't been paying attention have been engaged. People like Chris Murphy and a handful of others. But what was remarkable in the Senate was that you got dozens of senators coming to the floor and speaking for substantial portions of time in the context of really what became a group filibuster. Mm-hmm. And it was so powerful. These were incredibly good speeches.
Yes,
they
really were. I honestly thought more of this had been planned, but I'm glad you said that this was impromptu. 40 senators stood up for what we've been asking for. More with John Nichols about that right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Danielle, sitting in with Shano here for Tom. And we are still joined by the one, the only, John Nichols, national affairs correspondent with The Nation magazine and co-author of a new book, People Get Ready, The Fight Against a Jobless Economy and a Citizenless Democracy. You can check it out at thenation.com, and you can follow John on Twitter at Nichols Uprising. Thanks for sticking around with us, John.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
I was really inspired. I know that as liberals, we tend to make I always screw up this phrase, the perfect the enemy of the good. And I understand that there is a need, a desperate need to fight for more action. But every journey begins with a single step. And I think this was a pretty damn big step for 40 senators to stand on the floor for 15 hours and stand up for us. How do we embrace that? How do we push forward with that, celebrate what they did, and still fight for more?
Well, ironically enough, it's an election year. And so we find ourselves in a very interesting place. I thought one of the best speeches that was given yesterday, or one of the best interventions yesterday, came from Senator Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin. She's the only openly LGBT senator. Mm-hmm. And she spoke of something that's quite remarkable. She said, this nexus of terror and hate and gun violence and all these things coming together. And there is a possibility in such a moment that we feel a sense of chaos, that we feel somewhat overwhelmed, and we tend to look to leaders to tell us what to do or how to do things. Well, leaders have not gotten us out of this nexus, right?
Right.
We have a lot of funerals to go to, and so something's not working right. And what we really need to understand is that in a moment like this, we need to come to this struggle from where we live. It may be as parents who are so moved by Sandy Hook. It may be as members of communities that have been targeted, that have been victimized. It may be as people who do fear international threats and want to have rational responses to it. It may be to folks who want to really begin to address hate crimes and violence in this country. But at the end of the day, where this has focused in on is a debate about the easy access to weapons of war. And that's actually a very good place for it to go. Mm-hmm. It's not the answer to every question. It's not the answer to every challenge. But, boy, if you could say, okay, you think this is all about terror? Fair enough. Let's kind of make sure that people are going to commit acts of terror don't have easy access to weapons of war.
Right.
You think this is about hate? Which it is. Fair enough. Let's make it sure that haters don't have easy access to weapons of war. You could bring these threads together. And I can't emphasize to you how powerful it becomes if we simply open the debate. Because once we open the debate, once we have votes, then we see where people stand. Senators who are up for re-election have to defend their votes. This becomes a part of our politics. When we don't have action, when we don't have votes, it can't as easily become a part of our politics.
Yep. And
so, go ahead.
I think this is empowering on a bigger level as well. Seeing our elected representatives actually respond to our calls for action. Yes, it's an election year, and they tend to be a lot more responsive in election years, but that's because we're involved. That's because people are engaged, and it shows what would be possible if we were involved and engaged all the time.
And across the range of issues, man.
Right. That was exactly where I'm going.
Could we really go?
Could you imagine seeing a filibuster on climate change or on LGBT issues or on, getting money out of politics? These are all issues that people broadly support.
Well, we got a guy who's run for president in some ways based off a filibuster. Remember back in several years ago?
Yes.
It was Bernie Sanders who went to the floor on essentially a filibuster against austerity economics. And it was profound. I think one of the reasons that Sanders eventually evolved into a presidential candidate and really has had such a profound and ongoing effect on this year's politics is because of a filibuster. It didn't win the fight, but it put the issue on the table. Similarly, what we've seen Chris Murphy and his allies do is, they may not win this fight, but they have put the issue on the table. And I cannot, if people didn't see what happened last night, I highly recommend, you can go on YouTube and find it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to write about it, too, in The Nation today. Tammy Baldwin's speech was roughly a 30-minute intervention. It was amazing because she spoke about, the gun issues and the broader issues, and she closed it off in a way that this should be a part of our debate about guns. She didn't just read the names of everyone killed at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando on Sunday morning. She took her time and she read their stories.
Wow.
Just who they were. And she had pictures of them next to her. And I want to tell you something. Anybody that got through that
without crying,
tear in their eye. I mean, I was amazed that Baldwin did so eloquently and so calm. It's kind of a quiet strength going through it all. But boy, oh boy, she was talking about kids who love to dance and volunteers in the community and parents and suddenly all of these folks became very real to us, very human, and the loss, both the individual loss and the communal loss for the LGBTQ community, but also for all of us, for Latinos, because this was so many of those who died were Latinos.
90%.
For those of us also, I mean, I know that this isn't everyone's experience, but I think it is the experience of a tremendous number of people that whether you are gay or straight, you spent time in dance clubs.
Yep.
That were, friendly to the LGBT community. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
The whole story out. That's what an open debate does.
I think it's important. I think it's a great sign of what things can come if we stay engaged and we keep pushing Congress on these issues. John, thank you so much for joining us.
It's always an honor to be with you.
It's always great to talk to you. We'll be back.
You're listening.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.